All right, it is 1 o'clock, so I'll go ahead and get us started just for time's sake. Welcome, thanks for joining us today. Like Shannon already mentioned, you guys came in on mute. Would be best if you could say unmute to avoid any feedback, and go ahead and drop your name in the chat box along with your organization, and feel free to use that chat box to drop any questions throughout the whole process. We've got a great session planned for you all today. We've got speakers from VDEQ as well as the Virginia Foodshed Capital. I won't steal their thunder, but I did want to mention that we're recording today's training and be posting it on our YouTube page, as well as sharing the resources that they're presenting today. So look out for those in the coming days. And with that, if you guys are all ready, I will toss it over to Lars Bolton with the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality.
Well, thank you very much, Maura. So we're going to be presenting today on the Agricultural BMP Loan Program. We're going to give you guys a snapshot of where we are, and then hopefully give you an idea of where we're going. So our plan is right now we're going to present for about 30 minutes. We'll have 10 minutes of question and answer at the end. And then after that, if there are still additional questions, we'd like to take those offline just out of respect for other people's presentations. Phil, if you can move on the slide, please. So presenting with me today is also Phil Davis, who is our Agricultural BMP Project Manager in the Shenandoah Valley. And probably most of you probably know him from his time with NRCS up in that area. Phil just recently joined the program over the summer, and he has been an incredible asset for us. And he's part of the solution, so to speak. So next slide, please. So today, like I discussed earlier, we're going to talk a little bit about the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund with some background information, a little bit of information related to the Ag BMP Loan Program, and then Phil will talk about updates to our guidelines, some of the loan processes that we have, and then some of the initiatives that we're undertaking to make the process more efficient and more user-friendly. Phil, next slide, please. So the Agriculture BMP Loan Program is a small part of the overall Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund. The Revolving Loan Fund is an EPA-funded grant program where the states administer a revolving loan fund for water quality benefits. In the state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia, that has been primarily historically utilized for wastewater treatment projects. But there's the Ag BMP Loan Program. There's also programs associated with living shorelines. There's even residential septic programs that are operating in certain parts of the state, and land conservation loans. So those EPA requirements or federal requirements does affect how the Agriculture BMP Loan Program works. So it affects certain project eligibilities, it affects some of our reimbursement procedures, and it also controls our principal forgiveness amounts that are dictated because they're program wide. So if you guys aren't familiar with the concept of a revolving loan fund, basically the idea is that the grant funds seed a loan fund, and then the principal repayments and the interest payments continue to grow. And so as they come in, we make additional loans. So the program has approximately about $100 billion in loaning potential annually across all of the programs. And the total loan portfolio that the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund in Virginia has funded is in the multiple billions of dollars. So next slide, please. So what we're working with now is the reincarnation of a program that was established in 2000 and then paused in 2016. So the original program had 491 projects in 16 years. And then it stopped due to waning interest, perceived waning interest of the program. 2016 was about the time that a lot of the 100% cost share projects came online. And so there was less need for the loan program. And also there were some retirements within DEQ for people who were working in the ag program. And so between the two, the program was suspended. So based upon the feedback from the districts associated with the Chesapeake Bay goals, it was recognized that this program needed to be restarted if we were going to have any hope of hitting some of those goals, specifically for some of the larger livestock exclusion projects or animal waste control structures. So, some of the things that we wanted to do with the program required code changes, which is one of the things that the district was the Association of Districts was very involved with. And so we thank them for their help in that. Next slide, please. So we restarted the program on July 1st, 2019 with approximately $18 million in funds that would go into a revolving loan fund. And so as I described before, the idea is that $18 million would be loaned out, and then as repayments came back in, we could then have new additional loans utilizing that amount. There was so much demand for the program initially that we actually, the State Water Control Board approved an additional $10 million to be diverted from the core Clean Water Finance Revolving Loan Fund into the Agricultural BMP program to make sure that we did not become 100% obligated. So we have a total revolving fund of $28 million now. So we give out 0% interest loans for up to 10 years, depending upon the practice that you're doing or the lifespan of the equipment that is being purchased. So one of the key changes to the program is that all cost share or financial assistance that is earmarked for the project is used to pay down the principal on the loan, typically as the first balloon payment. However, if someone is not participating in a cost share program or is doing a tax credit only, like say a manure pump, like a WP4E, I believe is the pump, which is a tax credit, they're still eligible. You don't have to participate in a cost share program to be eligible for a loan. It just means you're going to be borrowing more money from us. Next slide, please. So here's a snapshot of where we currently are. So we have 2 applications pending, which the review period for January closed today. We received some applications this week that aren't in there. So we're going to have probably 5 projects that are going to be part of the next review period. There are 57 projects where they've been ranked and evaluated, and they've been given what's called a conditional authorization. That basically is assuming that they meet the credit requirements of the program, they would be authorized for funding. We've had 1 project where they applied, but unfortunately what they wanted to do is actually not an eligible BMP. We currently have 13 projects that have navigated the credit review process and their credit is approved. And now we're waiting on construction bids in order to close their loans. We've had 4 projects where the credit has been reviewed and unfortunately did not meet the credit criteria for the program, but all 4 of those projects are currently under review for principal forgiveness. So principal forgiveness is one of the things that was presented as a part of a code change that would allow us to convert all or part of the loan to principal forgiveness so that the producer wouldn't have to pay back anything in order to implement the project. And actually, we just got authorization a couple weeks ago to authorize our first project for principal forgiveness in the Blue Ridge area for an NRCS project that is going to target 1 million pounds of manure annually going into the local watershed. So we've had 31 projects withdraw, either because of timing or projects weren't moving forward. And we also found that some projects just, our process is, can be deliberate. And some projects move too quickly, especially with some of the smaller 100% cost share projects. They don't necessarily need us, but we were a backup plan for them. So we did have 31 projects withdraw, and we've closed 32 loans for just over $6 million. And then we've completed construction on 2 BMPs. So we have a total of 142 projects in our current portfolio. Next slide, please. So I'll hand off to Phil, and if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat box and we'll answer them after this presentation.
Thanks, Lars. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's good to be here. I'll be glad when we can all start meeting again in person and getting past the COVID-19 pandemic. But I appreciate everybody's time today in your busy schedules to tune in with us. So I apologize. I've got a lot of slides here with a lot of bullets, but I tried to lay it out to where if you guys are provided with the PDF of this presentation, hopefully it'll be a good reference for you, so that if there's something you don't remember, you can quickly reference it. And also it'll have our contact information as well, so that you guys can get in touch with us. So the first thing I wanted to touch on are some of the updates that we made as soon as I came on board. Lars and our program manager and our ag team had already discovered some things that they thought could be updated in our program guidelines to help make the process more efficient and make our program fit better with the way the conservation programs from our partners are currently structured and are working, and they're ever changing as well. So we worked with stakeholders, got stakeholder input, and we came up with some updates for the Ag BMP Loan Program's guidelines. And these are just some of the key points and updates that were made. But one was adding soil and water conservation districts as eligible applicants, especially so that they can apply for a no-till drill, which is one of the eligible practices for our loan program. Every now and then there are projects where the resource concerns that are being addressed may not be adjacent to the existing agricultural operation. And those situations are usually few and far between, but they do occasionally happen. There was language in the current guidelines that said that the practices had to be adjacent to that existing agricultural operation. So we're removing that as part of the updates to the guidelines. So hopefully that's going to give us more flexibility. We also added language to match what the code already states for local governments that want to start a local loan program. So we've added that into the guidelines, and we also upped the maximum loan amount. It was set at $500,000. We're proposing it to be increased to $600,000 per loan with a $1 million program cap. We also, with this program, the minimum loan amount was set at $10,000. And with some of the 100% cost share projects, their permanent debt is actually going to potentially be zero once they receive their cost share payments, and those payments go to pay down their principal. So in order to ensure that these loans can still move forward so that folks can bridge the gap so that they can pay contractors as they're completing the practices along the way, we want this loan program to be there for that. So you don't have to have $10,000 of permanent debt when the project is over. You can have less than $10,000 in permanent debt. The original guidelines had producer listed throughout. We went ahead and updated that to applicant to match the code change. And we also changed the wording to allow the Virginia Resources Authority to be able to conduct credit reviews in addition to farm credit. That may or may not happen, but we're definitely in talks with VRA to see if that is some potential there. And we wanted to make sure we got it into the guidelines so that that is something that we could further pursue. We also updated the eligible conservation practices to be able to coincide with what DCR and the Virginia Agricultural Cost Share Program, the VAX program, the changes that they've made. We want to make sure that we're staying up and up with all of those practices so that as our producers apply for loans, that their practices are going to be eligible. So we did have 3 practices that ended up being removed. I'll hit on those here in a minute. And we did add some new practices to the eligible practices table. The 3 that were removed, LA1T and 2T for livestock exclusion, they basically were replaced with the SL6W for the wide buffer and the SL6N for the narrow buffer. And the WP2T has been replaced with the WP4 wide and narrow buffer practices. So we went ahead and those have been removed. And then for the ones that we added the SL1 so that annual row crop ground can be converted to perennials. The WP4C, which is the 100% confinement, livestock operations and animal waste facilities, we've added that. The WP4LL, which is the loafing lot management system for beef animals, and the WP4SF for the seasonal feeding facilities with attached manure storage. So as far as the guidelines, we went through working with our stakeholders, getting comments, addressing their comments, and then they went through a comment period. The Soil and Water Control Board approved the guidelines updates on December 9th of 2020. And as part of the Administrative Process Act, they do have to go through another 30-day comment period, which they're going through as we speak, so that the public can determine if the guidelines are actually guidelines or if they're overstepping and becoming more like regulations. So February 18th, the guidelines should take effect, so long as there is no significant public comments saying that they're not guidelines, they're regulations. I don't think that's going to be a problem because, like I said, we've been very active working with our stakeholders throughout the entire process. So now I want to get into the actual loan process. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but hopefully we'll be able to take plenty of questions at the end. But I want to kind of go from start to finish how the loan process works. So the first thing is our producers are going to fill out our application. This is our current application. It's a 2-page document. And one of the things that we find out when we receive this application is that most of the time, the 2 numbers that we're looking for usually are not correct. So the second page, you can see we have the eligible practices for our program. And the idea is that the estimated cost to install that practice will be recorded on the second page. So that is the total cost of construction. You tally those up, the total goes here at the bottom, and then that would be recorded in this bottom box on the front page of the application. If they are receiving cost share, the cost share amount is the amount that would go in the top box. So what we're looking for is, what is the total loan amount that you're going to need? And then how much cost share are you going to receive or financial assistance to go towards the project? And then the difference will be the permanent debt that will be set up over the 10-year time frame at 0% interest. So once we receive those applications, we batch them on the 20th of each month, and then they're ranked and presented to our division director for conditional authorization. TMDL watersheds get a high priority, and we are using animal units for the ag waste practices and buffer acres for like the exclusion practices for the ranking. So a lot of you will get a phone call from those of us with the loan program asking for the animal units and the buffer acres for the projects that you're working with your producers with. And that's why we need that for the ranking. It's also based on, of course, the DCR and DEQ non-point source practices. So we have an eligible table that's part of our guidelines for all of the eligible practices. And there are a few of those that have been developed by DEQ's non-point source program. So those practices are also eligible. Once they're conditionally authorized, then we mail out a letter with the credit review instructions and the credit review forms to our participants as soon as that conditional authorization happens. And typically we'll do that towards the end of the month. So as far as the credit review, this can sometimes be a holdup with our process because there's actually quite a few documents that the applicants have to gather up and provide. I've found that towards the end of the year here, when folks are already kind of getting their tax returns together, it's been helping out a little bit because they have all that information around them, but they do have to provide 2 years of tax returns, a copy of their driver's license. There's a credit application and also a financial statement document where they have to record, different assets that they have for the farm. And if they have off-farm income, then their W-2s and all of their off-farm income also is included in this paperwork. There's 2 ways for them to get that information to the Virginia Resources Authority. They can mail it U.S. mail, and if they do that, we're highly recommending that they use it with some sort of a tracking number, so they can ensure that it gets to the Virginia Resources Authority. But also VRA can send a secure upload link, and that is the quickest and really the safest way to get that information directly to the Virginia Resources Authority. Farm Credit will do the credit review for the Virginia Resources Authority after they have reviewed all the paperwork to make sure it's complete. If it's not complete, VRA will let those of us at DEQ know, and then we contact the applicant to let them know what they need to provide that may have been left off the original documentation. Any permanent debt that's more than $80,000, there will be some collateral that's required. So we just want to make everybody aware of that if it is going to be a significant amount of permanent debt, then that is something that this program does require. And principal forgiveness is a consideration, but it's not a guarantee. And with that, the principal forgiveness, to qualify for that, projects, number one, have to have a high water quality benefit, and the applicants have to demonstrate a financial need. They can't be able to pass the credit review, and that's got to happen in order to be eligible for the principal forgiveness. And again, as Lars had mentioned, we have to be careful because it is a revolving loan fund. So we may not necessarily be able to grant principal forgiveness for every project that can't demonstrate the financial need. We've got to ensure the longevity of the revolving loan fund so we can continue to get more conservation on the ground in the years to come. The principal forgiveness also, other things that come into play are the availability of funds and the amount of those funds needed to let the loan close and move forward. Once we get the credit review documentation, we will schedule a site visit and come out and just double check to make sure all the practices are eligible, answer any questions that the producer or the applicant may have, and then we're going to move forward to getting to the closing. So once they've got their credit review back, and that can typically take 2 to 4 weeks, and it comes back as approved, we make the site visit. That's when we start asking for their conservation documents and construction quotes. So for the conservation documents, we're looking for the NRCS 1155 or 1156, if there's already been a modification. The Soil and Water Conservation District, we're looking for their cost share breakdown with their estimated cost and then cost share amounts, and then their signed approval letter for those funds, a signed conservation plan. If they're doing an ag waste practice, then we require a certified nutrient management plan, and that's been approved by DCR. And then we need final construction bids and quotes for the entire project. So anything that's going to be a part of that loan, we need a quote. And the reason for that is the final loan amount isn't going to be based on the estimates that were done for the conditional authorization. We want to make sure when we finalize that loan that we have actual construction bids so that we ensure there's enough money that's going to be in the loan. And there have been situations where the amounts on the application were not enough, and they even had to rerun their credit review after they received the construction bids and quotes, especially with the increases in cost for COVID-19, the effects that that's had. So it's very important to get that, and that can be a barrier that we have found, especially on some of these larger ag waste projects where they're trying to get engineering designs, and sometimes it takes a while to get a bid and a quote for those larger projects. Another thing I really wanted to hit on is we don't, and this is an EPA requirement, there's no in-kind services for the loan program. So if you are using your own labor or your hired farm labor to build the fence, we can't include any of that labor or any usage of your personal and farm-owned equipment. Now, if you rent equipment, we can honor those costs, and we can honor the materials cost. But as far as in-kind services, we can't put a monetary value like the soil and water conservation districts can in certain situations, for tax credit and that sort of thing. Also, I did want to point out that we can go back, and if we conditionally authorize a project and find out that the final quotes are showing that they need more funds, we can go back and authorize additional funds to keep the project going and to get the loan closed. Every now and then, we will have requests for additional planning documents, such as design documents, sizing calculations, some of the planning maps. And we also ask the producer for a project end date so that the Virginia Resources Authority can start setting up, the payback program and amortize the loan based off of that project end date. So once we have all those conservation documents, all those final quotes, then we put together a closing packet and we send it to the Virginia Resources Authority for processing and scheduling loan closing. And it is looked at by multiple folks within VDEQ. We have a pretty good QA/QC review before it even goes to the Virginia Resources Authority. They also, as part of the closing packet, VRA is going to contact the producer, determine how they want to pay it back. And they have the option. They can pay it back monthly, annually, biannually, quarterly, whatever works best. The VRA will explain the closing process and how they're going to do it. COVID-19 has made it, pretty crazy. So they've done a great job of working with folks, being able to get things expedited, mailed quickly. And I think they have a way that they can actually send those documents electronically and encrypted and everything too, if that's the best option for the applicant. But the other thing is there's going to be assignment of payment forms included in the closing package. So the producers will sign for exactly what payments will go from the Soil and Water District or NRCS directly to the Virginia Resources Authority as those payments are made. So once VRA sends everything to the applicant, they sign, get everything notarized, they send it back to the VRA, and then they'll set the closing date and they'll close the loan on that date. Once the loan is closed, that's when we can start issuing disbursements when the producers turn in eligible invoices. So as the project is ongoing, let's say they go ahead and they get the well drilled, the producer can turn in the bill for the well drilling. We can go out, make a site visit, see that the well's been drilled, go ahead and release the payment for that so that they can be paying the contractors as they go along. So as they complete the watering system, they can turn in the invoices, we'll verify everything is eligible, and we'll disperse those funds. And we'll continue to do that until 95% of the funds have been dispersed based on the individual DCR practice, such as, for instance, in SL6, we'll disperse 95% until we know that the Soil and Water District is ready to certify that the practice has been completed to meet standards and specifications. Once we issue a disbursement, usually the payment can take 3 weeks, but typically folks are getting paid within 7 to 10 days if everything is complete and we go out on a site visit and there's no questions or no issues. For the loan payments, again, the first payment is set up as a balloon payment equal to the anticipated cost share. Sometimes those cost share payments are going to be less than what was originally figured. So we ask that soil and water districts and NRCS, when you're making these payments, if you can communicate that with those of us at DEQ so that we can stay in good communication with VRA. That way, if they don't get the total amount in cost share that they were expecting for that first payment, they can make their adjustments so the producer doesn't have to pay anything out of pocket to meet that first required balloon payment. Also, I need to point out, if for some reason a loan defaults, VRA will pursue legal action to get those funds back. So in wrapping up the take-home points, accurate application and good communication is key. We're really trying to improve communication between our DEQ, ag team, and our conservation partners. You know, the loan program is not guaranteed. Not all applicants are going to be approved, but we're hoping that we can approve the majority of them, and that the projects that have a high water quality value, you know, we're still going to be able to figure out a way to get that conservation on the ground. The earlier that we can obtain conservation documents and construction quotes, the better. So please keep that in mind as you're working with your producers. And again, we can disperse up to 95%, but we're going to sit on that last 5% until we know that everything meets plans and specifications. And again, when you make payments, if you can just let the local DEQ regional project manager know, that would be great. So we can just keep that communication between ourselves, VRA, and our conservation partners, keep that communication up and running. And as far as streamlining, we did have a streamlining virtual meeting December 16th to address comments that were made based on some of the ideas that we had sent out to everybody, things that we've already identified that we think we can work on to make the program more efficient. Some of those things are updating our application, which we are already working on. We had a lot of comments about, you know, something that could be handed out to the producer and to partners that covers all the steps of the application, loan processing, loan closing, the whole entire process. So we've developed, and we're working on finalizing that now. We're calling it the map to closing. So hopefully that will be coming out very soon. And we're also going to have a separate checklist document that's geared towards the actual applicant, so that they'll know every piece of paper that they need to be responsible for throughout the entire process. So we're trying to get these documents together, and hopefully that's really going to help people understand exactly what they need to do to make the loan closing process as quick as possible. So with that, Lars, if you want to come back on, we will open this up for questions.
All right, thanks, Phil. So we had a couple of questions in the chat boxes, and and so I've typed in answers into the text boxes, the chat box, but I'll review those. So the first was a question about the dashboard snapshot, and the spreadsheet showed a zero value. Phil, can you go back to that slide, the dashboard?
Yes.
For loan approved. And so I just really quickly want to review what that status means, just so one part. So that loan approved status at 0 means that the producer has gotten us everything they need to get to us in order to close the loan, and we've submitted it to VRA, but VRA has not closed that loan. So the 0 there means that there is currently no backlog in the closing line, in the line for closing. So that's a good thing that that's 0. And so we have closed 32 loans for $6.2 million total. Okay. Debbie Cross asked about whether or not they can submit copies of invoices, and that the answer is yes. We don't need the originals for our program. And as a matter of fact, we encourage producers to scan and email the invoices to us to speed the reimbursement process. And so there's a no issue, less of an issue with the possibility of invoices getting lost, especially with everyone working remotely these days. And then it just makes everything faster. Let's see, what's another question? So Melissa Allen asked about whether or not we conduct site visits. And yes, we do conduct periodic site visits to confirm that the invoice components have been delivered or installed. And typically we are coordinating with the producer or the local district offices or the NRCS people, but we are very careful to make sure that we're following all of the COVID-19 protocols in terms of social distancing and stuff like that, separate vehicles and all that sort of stuff. And in some cases, we also, if the districts or the NRCS conservation specialists are going into the field anyways, they document the components that are installed for us and send us pictures, and that's an acceptable form of review for us also. So hopefully that answers the questions. And so Tricia, no, they're asking about, so we had originally accepted application for no-till drills from the districts. And so those that have applied will not have to reapply. We are going to, once the guidelines become final, hopefully in 3 weeks, we're going to be reaching out to each of the districts that applied and to get the process moving forward to basically make every district whole in terms of providing them what's called a funding agreement versus a loan agreement, because the districts still are not eligible under Commonwealth Code to take on debt. So we're going to provide what's called funding instead of a loan. And then there's a lot of questions going on here. So let me VDEQ issuing a loan process for district ownership expect the component all loan payments issue contract paid if some needs to be corrected. So yes, you are correct. So if you could see issues with VDEQ issuing loan payment before the district or NRCS has inspected a component. If a loan payment is issued and a contractor is paid, this could be difficult if something needs to be corrected. That's why we withhold that 5% per practice to kind of have a carrot to get people to finish.
Yes.
But we also don't want to have the payments delay the completion of the project either. So it's a kind of a bit of a balancing act.
Yeah, and Melissa, that's where
go ahead.
We reach out to our district partners, and I try to stay in really good communication as I'm getting invoices. And if there's any type of issue, then I work with the local district before I, would sign off on a disbursement.
So Bill Fleming asks if we know how many saltwater conservation districts currently have no-till drill equipment, and can arrangements be made to visit or contact one of them? We don't know how many districts have that. We can reach out through DCR to find out what that number is. We currently have 13 districts that have applied for no-till drill funding. So, and we'll be reaching out to each of them in turn once the guidelines become final in the first week in February. Bill, does that answer your question? If you know who they are, we're more than willing to reach out to them one-on-one to let them know that they can apply for funding if they want to replace or upgrade their no-till drill equipment that they rent out. There's one other thing I wanted to talk about the reimbursement process that Phil touched on, is so the way that our program works is that any expense incurred after the date of application, not after the date of loan closing, but the date they actually applied to the program, becomes reimbursable when the loan is closed. So, if, as they're working through the process, if a producer is taking on expenses for either equipment or for design or for whatever, we will go back to the date of their application to consider what is eligible. And in the case of engineering costs, we'll actually, if they've incurred them before their application because they didn't understand the full expenses and they applied to us late, we'll even kind of look back further than that. Debbie Cross was asking about regional contacts. And so here are the contacts for the program. And if you'd like, we can also provide you with a list of the counties that each of these regional offices cover. So it basically works out that I'm the project manager for Northern Virginia. Let's just call it east of 95. Phil obviously has the Shenandoah Valley area, and he helps me by covering some of the projects with Lord Fairfax and even Culpeper Soil and Water Conservation District. Bill Spencer handles Southwest Virginia, and he's located in Abington. And then Drew Miller is in the Blue Ridge area at the Salem office, and so he works with like Blue Ridge Soil and Water Conservation District and a few others. And what we'll do is we'll send a county list to the association. So when they disperse this presentation to each of you, you'll have that county list at the same time. I believe Mountain and Peaks of Auto Districts, Mark, are already on our applicant list. And then there are a few others. What is typical time from initial application to closing? Alan Jackson. Alan, that is a widely variable time because so much of the process is determined by the agricultural producer's response to requests for information. So it takes us basically 30 days from application on the outside to provide a conditional authorization. And then it can take months for a producer to respond with the documentations that are required for the credit review. And then a lot of times there's a lot of back and forth in that process. And then it's been very difficult, especially recently, for producers to get contractors to even call them back. And even then the prices are nebulous sometimes from the contractors. So I'm very skeptical to say that there is a typical time because every project is atypical. I will say that we have gotten loans out in as little as 8 weeks, and we also have had loans that have taken a year to close. So it's very variable based upon the responsiveness of the agricultural producer. And we've also had issues with like nutrient management planning and things like that, and difficulty getting those nutrient management plans signed off on. So there's just a lot of moving parts there.
Lars and Phil, this is Shannon. There is one question that hasn't been answered yet that looks like it's been asked twice. If you could explain, if you could explain the difference between the maximum loan cap and the program cap.
Oh, sure. That's easy. So basically, it's $600,000 for any one project and $1 million in total. So it is possible for a producer to have multiple loans with us, and actually several do. So the idea is that we would provide them with enough funding to complete any single construction project, and then no more than a total of $1 million in outstanding loans at any one point in time. But then obviously as they pay the loans down, they become eligible for more funding. Does that make sense to everyone?
I do believe so, but if anyone needs any further discussion about that, you can put it in the chat box at the end. If we have time, we can go over it, or we can also explain in more detail offline. Okay, it looks like the questions have stopped. So if we want to move forward.
All right, thanks everybody. And please reach out to us at any time. We're here to help, and, we're looking forward to working with everybody to help keep getting conservation on the ground and making sure all the hard work that you all are doing gets installed. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Philip and Lars. I will pass over to Michael Riley if you're ready to discuss the Virginia Foodshed Capital. Take it away, Michael. I think you're on mute, Michael.
Sorry about that. I was focused on trying to get my screen shared. All I said was good afternoon, so nothing was missed there. I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation. I'm having trouble. Hang on one second. Apologize. All right, we had practiced this, so I don't know. Let me try again here. Okay.
And I've got it as well if you want me to pop it up.
Yeah. Why don't you do that? This is weird. I've never had this problem before. I'm not finding my presentation.
You're totally
at all.
fine.
Yeah, thanks more. There we go. Okay, great. I'm gonna also just kill my video here too. So, okay, great. Well, again, good afternoon, everybody. I really am grateful for this opportunity to speak to you all this afternoon. I want to be very mindful of the time here. It's 1:46. Again, I am the co-founder and executive director of a nonprofit called Virginia Foodshed Capital. And what I'll do here in just 10 minutes or so is just kind of briefly take you through some background on our organization and what we do, and how we could potentially be of service to SWCD, DEQ, and help out in furtherance of conservation around Virginia. So next slide, please. So just quickly, a little background about myself. I'm sort of somewhat of some unusual suspect to be doing this. I don't have a background in agriculture. I actually worked in at a corporate job for many years before this, focused on finance. And I won't go through all the details, but about 10 years ago, I moved to Charlottesville and got very involved in local food, the local food scene, local agriculture, and got to know a lot of farmers. And one thing led to another, and I started this organization, co-founded it in 2018. I currently am on the board of directors of the VDEQ, Virginia Association for Biological Farming. I'm on the statewide Farmers Market Association. I'm involved with Food Justice Network here in Charlottesville, and also involved in some national organizations, National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. So over the years, I've gotten very involved in local agriculture, particularly, local to consumer, direct to consumer agriculture, those farms practicing organic, certified organic, and non-certified organic agriculture. And as a nonprofit, we have a board of directors. It was a slide that I sort of eliminated from my presentation, but we just, we have representatives from around the state, a couple farmers on our board, local food hubs represented, and some others involved in food access and food justice around the state. So as you can see, our mission is to provide financial stewardship to farms and businesses promoting an equitable and regenerative local food economy. Again, founded in 2018. We are also a certified community development financial institution, otherwise known as a CDFI. And what that means is basically it's a certification issued by the U.S. Treasury to basically underscore those nonprofits mostly are what they are, that service and provide credit to marginalized, underserved populations. There are more than 1,000 around the nation. There are about 20 in Virginia. Foodshed Capital is one of only 3 in the entire country that's solely devoted to food and agriculture. Next slide, please. Again, just that's a little bit more about our history, which you know is not too extensive. It's a couple of years, and you know, we're proud of what we've done in such a short period of time. Next slide. So why did we start this organization? You know, again, it really came down to some conversations that I and my co-founder Hunter Hopcroft, who lives down and works down in Richmond, actually in land conservation. He and I, over the years, had many interactions with smaller family farms, again, particularly those doing direct-to-consumer business, and you know, learned about the difficulties that they were having accessing capital, particularly for smaller loans. You know, some of them only needing $5,000–$10,000. And you know, due to income limitations and lack of collateral, you know, and frankly, probably the biggest barrier of all, just in terms of dealing with you know, commercial credit, is just lack of understanding of small scale, often organic agriculture. And you know, even for government programs, a lot of great programs out there. We work with a lot of farmers that have received FSA land, loans to purchase land. You know, and they do some great things with their microloan program, but we found that, you know, a lot of farmers really still struggle with the process of dealing with some of the government programs. And so Foodshed Capital came along really as just an alternative, really what we consider to be an unconventional framework for some of these smaller farms to access capital. You know, we're really, you know, we're not in competition. We don't consider ourselves in competition with anybody. We really just kind of see ourselves as filling a niche and hopefully, if anything, partnering. And that's sort of, again, you know, why I'm grateful just even to speak here today, is really partnering with other organizations and figuring out how we can sort of insert ourselves into the solution out there for the benefit ultimately of our producers who are doing such a phenomenal job day in and day out producing our food. And that's really what we're all about. Next slide. So for us, unconventional looks kind of like this, and you know, it's really great to see that we're sort of on the same wavelength with DEQ in many ways. We don't see that very often, so you know, certainly really just amazing what DEQ is doing, you know, with the loan program. You know, when we came along and offered 0% interest, we received a lot of pushback from a lot of people saying, like, who does that, right? And we still sort of received some puzzled looks about that, but we felt like, you know, to really provide a solution for some of our smaller producers, that 0% interest is just really so critical. And when we can't do that, you know, as low interest as we can, sometimes, you know, as we get into borrowing more money ourselves, obviously we have a cost of capital. And so, you know, we have to charge an interest rate, but we're very committed to keeping those rates low. We're very flexible with the terms. You know, we really pretty much leave it up to the producer what works best for them. You know, we pretty much always offer a long grace period to get started, work around, you know, seasonality and those sort of things. Quick turnarounds probably right now one of our biggest assets. We'll see how long that lasts. We're trying our best, but you know, we've turned some loans around. There was a couple earlier this year that I think we closed within 2 weeks. And most of that has to do with the fact that, you know, we know so many of these smaller producers. So, you know, when we get approached for a loan, a lot of times we just already have a familiarity. And so it makes it a lot easier. Partnership, again, you know, is really critical. And I'll sort of kind of breeze through some more of these things here in the interest of time. But, you know, you can see some of the other things that, you know, credit score is another thing. We are doing our best so far to stay away from looking at credit scores, particularly for, again, you know, some farmers of color and others who are already marginalized by the financial system. You know, credit scores can really be an impediment for folks like that. So next slide. This is just today, quickly, the work that we've done. You know, again, 34 loans is pretty small. Yeah, you guys, DEQ, are doing that. You know, blowing by us on that number, and the overall amount is pretty small. You can see, just do the quick math, that average loan size has been under $10,000. We're in the process of increasing that, so that's one of our goals for this year. In fact, we are in the process of closing a $50,000 loan. So that would be our largest loan to date. And we really do focus again on working with farms that are typically underserved. A lot of farms owned by women and people of color. Technical assistance is again something that we know is really important to the process for us, and we're working on that. We started our work really just around Charlottesville and Richmond, and have pretty much grown to a large part of the state. We're actually even doing some work in Pennsylvania as well. Next slide. Use of funds, I'm just going to go quickly through this. You can see that there, it's pretty straightforward. Equipment mostly, storage, and we actually do work with some non-farm businesses. These are what we'd call, sort of local food type businesses that really have, the main criteria, really primary criteria for us to work with them is that they have to support local agriculture. So, like if it's a restaurant, we've done one restaurant loan, and they pretty much source a large part of their ingredients from local producers. At the bottom left there is, note on bridge loans and cost share. It's obviously germane to the conversation here, and that's something we're very, very excited about and really want to do more of in the future. So we jump to the next slide, please, Maura, and I'm going to go through these quickly. I just have two examples of some loans we've done. One is with Verdant Acres, which is a NRCS bridge loan. Actually, the great thing about this loan was it sort of killed two birds with one stone. We provided a bridge loan for their a new high tunnel, and then once that got paid back, we're turning around and use the producers turning around and using the funds for another project on the farm. Next slide. And then this is one that was in partnership with SWCD. It was in the Headwaters District. Wild Rose Orchard in Mount Sydney. They had a livestock exclusion fence, which they also wanted to build a deer fence around the property. And so we were able to come in and provide a loan, a $10,000 loan that helped them with the cost, the upfront costs on that fence. And then by piggybacking the deer fencing around their orchard, they were able to get a discount from the vendor, which really helped them save a lot of money. And so again, sort of another project that, we were able to sort of get a double bang for the buck, and really it's the kind of work that we're really excited about going forward. And so that leads to next slide, please. So just I'll wrap up here. It's really for us going forward, the work we want to do as we try to grow our organization is really focus on partnerships. We're really proud of the work we've done so far, but again, not to sort of dwell on it, but we are pretty small, and as we grow, as a nonprofit, it's all about impact. And so the more impact that we can have in partnership with others around the state, around the region, the more we are going to be able to grow and hopefully be able to access the funding we need to be able to do the work. So, we hopefully, through discussions, it's been great to get to know Lars and Phil, and we appreciate the, opportunity to bat some ideas around with them. And, hopefully maybe down the road as things go on, we can be of assistance for maybe some smaller loans, those that do need a quick turnaround. We're not afraid of doing short-term bridge loans, for us, again, it's about impact. And so, for us to do a bridge loan is actually really exciting. We like those kinds of opportunities, and hopefully this is something that we can do quite a bit of down the road. And so with that, I will wrap up here. The last slide there, I think, just has my contact information. Any of y'all can feel free to reach out to me by email or by phone anytime. When life gets better here for all of us, look forward to meeting more of you. I think I've probably met a few of you on this call maybe over the years, but I would love to get to know more of you in person. And again, I thank you so much for the opportunity this afternoon. Questions,
well,
I guess.
Thank you, Michael.
Sort of button up against 1 o'clock, so I don't necessarily want to hold anybody, but if anybody wants to reach out with questions afterwards, I'll be more than happy to do what I can to address those.
Gotcha. Well, thank you, everyone. That was perfect timing. I'll make sure to send out everyone's contact information so you have that. I'll send the recording, the material shared today, and then a link to our website as well. But yeah, feel free to reach out with any questions. This went really well. Thanks for joining, everyone.